that money, run on down the line. Take that money, run on down the line.
It's funny, these trees, I mean, the oaks here, I mean, we have the Spanish moss.
Yes.
You also, it's almost like it's a planter on top of these things.
It
You know, you
is.
have so many things growing on top of the.
It's true. And this moss is so critical because, you know, we call it Spanish moss. It's neither Spanish nor moss. It's an epiphyte, an air plant. And for those strong women who lived here, they would have used this stuff to make the floor a little bit softer. They would have used this to help with their monthly menstrual cycle. They used this to pack wounds. And before we said goodbye to her, my grandmother wore it in her shoes for years because it was thought to bring down high blood pressure and cholesterol. Don't look for that in the Journal of American Medicine. It's not there. So these are things that intrinsic connection to nature, still very, very African. They brought it with them. Remember, they brought everything with them.
No.
And when we think about this tree being so old, this oak allée, these trees were planted in 1920 when the house was changed. So this oak allée and this oak allée. And I always reference that because people
Sorry,
ask
are you
us.
calling it an oak alley?
An oak allée.
Alley, not alley.
Allée.
Okay.
Yes, the fancy French, oak allée.
Gotcha.
People ask, and it's a hard question, were people hung from these trees? We can't definitively say yes or no, but it's not likely these trees, they were planted in 1920. If it happened, and we don't have any oral testimony to back it up, would be this tree over here, which I call the face tree, or this one here. So we're searching, but we don't have any documentation that any lynchings occurred here at McLeod. But then we're limited into how far we can go back. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm very proud to be able to tell our story because for so long we were told your stories don't matter, they don't count, it's made up. It's taken us a while as Black people to not be afraid. And there were always people who were doing it quietly.
Right.
Now there are so many more storytellers standing together. And shout out to my colleagues across the country who do this because the emotional toil, it's a lot. There are some days when I just go home and cry. And then I move on because I have to come back here because they could not take a day off.
Yeah.
And so I draw strength from what they left us, from those women who continue to be women, who continue to take care of people, from those who tried to make a difference, who dared to learn to read and to write, and who found the strength.
Was it? They weren't allowed to?
No. And even years later, they still struggled with that. I want to show you something. I know we won't get to cover this. This is a letter from a lady named Renda Bouknight. You see, it's dated 1932. She's writing back to Willie because she needs him to identify her. So we've calculated she was probably trying to get state benefits in New York.
Oh, right.
Social Security would kick in 3 years later. So she pours her heart out to him in her best English, trying to get him to remember that she washed clothes for his mother here. And that her little kids played with his little sisters. And she basically begs him.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, funnily, it's easy, but...
It's all phonetic. Yes.
Yeah, because it is phonetic, that's right, yeah.
She's trying to get him to remember.
Right, I was living on McLeod Place 20 years ago.
This is the part that gets me. I write to ask you to help me. I need you to put in your own handwriting, identify me.
Yeah, there it is.
Get some white people down south who can say I am who I am so that I can get these benefits. That's what she's asking this man.
Right, yeah.
At 76, she's got to come back here.
That's interesting.
And so what we're trying to figure out is, why did he keep this letter? Did he pull it out at dinner parties to laugh at her? Did he actually help her? What happened to her? I found her in the census the other day.
Oh, did you?
She got married, she had a family, but did she ever get those benefits? Here she is. That's Anna Ravenel.
Oh, really?
Real person.
Yeah.
And that, you just asked me about the interpretive piece. Part of it is bringing the story forward into modern times. It didn't just end.
Right.
And she went on to have a family. So my hope is that one day I could find a great-great-grandson so I could give them this letter. And I can tell them that their grandmother stood up for herself. And she was her own best advocate with what little education she had. And that it mattered. It mattered. That's the power of McLeod.
There's so much more to explore, and we want you to join us on The Good Road.
For more in-depth content, meet us on the internet at thegoodroad.tv.
Hear more great stories, connect to organizations, and make sure you download our podcast, Philanthropology.